Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the channel. If this is your first time here, I appreciate you joining me. If you're returning, I appreciate the support. Let's talk about what we're doing today. This is my third video on creating projects on your CNC. If you're just learning how to use the software, learning how to use your machine, learning how to understand the processes that it takes to create a project, those are all the reasons that I'm putting this series together. This is our third video. In the first one, we created a pretty simple tray. Okay, so I taught you a couple of tools. The second video, we used a couple of different bits in order to create an oval tray, which I think was out of spalted maple. And today, we're going to take a piece of cherry and we're going to add some text. And I'll try to get this a little closer for you to be able to see that. All right, so we're going to incorporate the three tools that we've learned. The very first one is we learned how to use a profile tool. Then we learned to use an offset tool. Then we also learned how to create um, a pocket. We learned how to center objects on our material. And so for this video, we're going to be adding text to our project. So we'll be using 3 bits. We're still going to keep it under 20 minutes. Again, the more you do this, the faster you can do it. Okay. And what I mean by that is you don't have to worry too much about getting your bits to run faster. Is if you just make your process more efficient. Okay. You start making tool changes, you start editing software a little bit easier and a little bit faster. That's where you're going to save some of your time. But before we get started, if you enjoyed the other videos, I appreciate the support. If this is your first time here, appreciate you hitting that like and subscribe button for me. And then I do have a couple of other things that I want to share. I'm a little bit behind posting this video, and I kind of want to show you why. You might see this big structure in my backyard here. So I've been busy building this 16 by 10 shed that I'm hoping to put my CNC, my laser, and a couple of other tools in. And I'll show you a few pictures. That's been taking up a little bit of my time lately, and so that's why this video is a little bit late. All right, let's get to the software. Let's get this thing going. Okay, so here we are in VCarve. Let's go ahead and create our tray. We're going to move a little quick here because this is a little bit of a review from the first 2 videos that we made. All right, so if you need a little refresher on that, feel free to go back to videos where we make a tray in under 30 minutes and then one under 20 minutes, which was an oval. But this one's going to be a little bit of a rectangle. We're going to make it on some cherry, and we're going to add a little text to it to create a nice additional visual, which I think can kind of upscale some of your projects. All right, here we go. So we're going to create a new file, and of course that gets you to this page. Immediately it wants to know what size, and we know that the width of our board is 13, and it's 6 7/8. So we'll convert that over to decimal, so it's 6.875. And we know that the thickness is 0.88. Again, we're going to go from the center of the material, and let's choose OK. So there's our canvas. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is create our perimeter of the tray. So let's click our rectangle, and we're going to want corners that are rounded. And the size of our tray is just slightly smaller than what our material is. So our material is 13. So let's make this, let's leave it at 12.85. And we know that it's 6.8. So we can go 6.75 as well. And let's choose create. Okay. Remember that we're using our roller mouse. And with our roller mouse function, we can enlarge and minimize. All right, let's go ahead and click on our box. We're going to center it. Perfect. That is the perimeter of our tray. Close. Let's create our offset. Go down. We'll select the outer part of our tray. And again, if I'm going too fast, it's because we've already covered this in a different video. And so, again, feel free to go back and review those. Let's choose offset layout. And we want it to go inwards. And I think for this tray, let's go about 5 inches or about a half an inch would be great. And let's choose an offset. Now you notice here that it's created the offset for us, but the corners are square. Okay, let me show you how to fix that. Let's go ahead and close that. Let's click on our offset that we just created. And let's go over to the rectangle tool. Okay, and inside here, if you'll choose a radius external, and then if you'll put your mouse right over to get to the corner, and if you click it, and you can see that it has rounded each of the corners here for us. Okay. Now, sometimes it does that for you automatically, but that's the way that you fix that. Okay. So we've got our tray outline, and now we've got our offset. Now here's the part I want to teach you that's new today, and this is using the text tool. In order to create text in VCarve Pro, you can import some fonts and things like that. Let's just use what comes with the software. So we're going to use this little draw text. And let's write whatever text we want. And in this case, let's do something for our significant other. See, you had a pretty nice quote earlier. Let's see. Okay, that's pretty nice. Okay. Now here's the part where you get to select what font you want to make it. I like to keep things kind of simple. You'll figure out which fonts you like to use the best and which ones are able to carve a little bit neater without a lot of manipulation. So let's go ahead and stick with Times New Roman here. And if you want to give it a little flair, maybe make it italic and choose close. Okay, now you can see it's not quite in the middle of our project. So just like our other rectangles, we're going to click on it. We're going to go over to our alignment tool, and we're going to align it to the center of the material. Boom, there you go. So you can see already that this is going to make a nice little tray, and it'll significantly upscale your projects. Okay, but let's take a quick look at something here, something I think is kind of important. If you look at the text a little bit closer, let me zoom in a little bit here for you. Okay, you can see that there's a big space between the W and the H. Okay, so we're going to want to clean that up a little bit. And then also, anytime you're doing text, you're going to want to look. Here's another space between the M and the Y, and the A and the R. So it looks like that's really, really close. Okay, so what you want to do is you want to give your bits enough space to be able to maneuver. In that way, it's going to make your letters look much cleaner. So how do we fix that? Okay, so let's go to our text tool. And you highlight whatever it is that you want. In this case, we want to fix this. Now let me get a little bit closer here. Do you see this little VA right here in between the W and the H? There's a greater than sign and a less than sign. Okay. And if you click your mouse button, you can see that those arrows are pointing inward. Okay. So they're going to close the gap between your letters. Okay. But let's just say you overlapped them like that and you're like, whoops, I went too far. Okay, now you need to spread them out. So you're going to hold down the shift key and you can see that your little arrows now point outward. And again, you click your left mouse button and you get a little bit of space. Okay. So that's the way that you create spaces here. Okay, I like to go ahead and do them all while I'm remember you have to have your word selected. Okay, you want to close this gap just a little. And then we want to separate the A and the R. And hold down our shift. And then maybe our R and T is a little bit too close. Again, I'm just looking at this kind of visually. What's appealing to the eye? Okay, sometimes whatever the numerical numbers are that it gives you, they don't always work. Okay, so sometimes I just like to go by what I see. Does it look good? If it looks good, then I just go with it. Okay, let's get a little bit of space here between our T and the R. Take a little space out of that one and a little room. Okay, I think that looks pretty good. Okay, maybe a little room between the A and the D here. And you don't need a whole lot of work on this, but you know, the more you do it, the more you're able to kind of spot problems before they happen. Okay, I think that looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and close that. Okay, at this point, we've got our tray outline, we've got our offset, and then we've got our text in the middle. Okay, and for this project, we're going to be using 3 bits. Okay, we're going to be using the profile in mill. We're going to be using the bold bit, and both of those we used in a previous video. And then this time, to do our text, we're going to use a 90-degree V bit. Okay, so one more um, tool that you just learned was how to use the text tool, how to add the text, and how to change it to different kind of fonts, and then also to remove some of the spaces. Okay, let's go over to the cam side and let's create our toolpaths. All right, the first thing what we want to create is, let's just do the easy one, is let's go ahead and do the pocket first. All right, so let's select whatever it is we want to pocket out. Let's choose our pocket toolpath. Okay, we're going to start at the top, which is 0, 0. Again, if I didn't mention this before in another video, um, every one of these instructions, whether it's in the CAM side or the CAD side, if you start from the very top of the menu and kind of work your way down, just kind of answer all the questions as you get down to the bottom, right? And then you know that you've kind of finished that section. Okay, so here we're going to start at the top. We want to start at the 0, 0. All right, how deep do we want to make this pocket? I like to go about maybe half of the width of the thickness. So in our case, we started out at 8, 8. So let's go to 4, 4, which is about halfway. And again, you'll figure out, depending on what material you use, you know, if you use spalted maple, it's pretty light. And so the deeper you go with that, you're making a tray that's really, really light by the time you cut out all the space inside. So kind of keep that in mind. Walnut is going to be pretty heavy, so cutting out a deeper pocket, probably not such a big deal. Okay, but since we're using cherry here, I'm gonna try to go about half the width of uh, our entire material. So that's going to be 0.44. All right, we're going to use a bold bit for this one. And you can see here that it wants to do 2 passes for the bold bit. And as I mentioned to you before, if we did 2 passes, that means it's going to go down 0.22, okay, which is almost a quarter of an inch. 0.25 is a quarter. You know, depending on your machine, maybe that's too much. I know it adds more time. We'll look at that in a minute. Okay, let's leave it now for 2 passes. All right, so it's going to go 1 trip around, cut out 0.22, and then it'll make another trip and cut out the other 0.22. Let's use the raster, which goes back and forth. The profile pass I like to do last. Okay, so I want to make sure it cleans up all the edges. And I like to use the ramp plunge move here. Just a slight ramping in so your bit doesn't go straight down into the wood and then start cutting. Okay, you want it to kind of go in at a slight angle. All right, so I give it a 0.002 there. You could use anything like 0.1, or you could create 1 inch. This is really, really pretty small. And then let's choose calculate. Perfect. Okay. Now if we want to preview this, we're simply going to press play. There we go. Great. There's your pocket. Perfect. All right, let's close that. Let's go back to our 2D view. Let's go ahead and do our letters now. Okay, and the letters is going to be a new toolpath operation called VCarve. engraving toolpath. Okay, it's kind of on the second row with the letter V. Let's select that. Okay, now again, starting at the very top, it wants to know what is the start depth of your text. Okay. Remember that we cut the pocket out, correct? And the pocket went down 0.44. All right, so theoretically, the bit needs to at least go down to 0.44 to start with. It needs to think that that's the very top of the material. All right. If we were just carving it without doing the pocket, we would start that at 0, 0. But let's start at 0.044. Okay, we don't need to worry about the flat depth for now. We're going to use the 90-degree V bit. You can use a 30-degree if you want your letters to be a little bit deeper, okay, a little bit sharper. I think the V bit works really nice. I've got a 1/4 inch. We'll select that, and then we'll just scroll down to the bottom. What else? Nothing needed there, nothing needed there. I'll choose calculate. All right, let's reset that, and let's preview it. Okay, now you can see here in this preview that it looks kind of thick, and it's like, wow, that doesn't look that good. Okay, but remember, that was kind of the second operation that we did. Let's go ahead and run the first one, which was the pocket. So let's click on our pocket toolpath down here in the bottom right and select play. Okay, there we go. So that looks pretty good. I'm going to reset all of these just to start from the beginning. So if we were running this on the machine right now, okay, the very first thing we're going to do is we're going to run the pocket. Remember, you want to run the toolpath. Kind of creates the most significant work on the piece, because in this case, you've got this router that's going back and forth, and it's taking out a lot of material, right? So you want the bulk of the material to be intact while it's doing that. All right, so let's run our pocket first. So we'll select pocket, and then we'll choose play, and you can see that it cuts out our pocket. Perfect. All right, let's go down to our V-carve, which is our text. Select that and press play, and you can see that it creates our nice text for us there. Okay, so the next thing left is just to create our profile around and cut out the project. And that's going to be this outside line. Let's close this, and this one's going to be a simple profile. All right, we're going to start at the top. Our material is 0.88. Let me give you a quick tip here. Okay, let's just say you don't remember, gosh, how deep did I say that material was when you started out? Okay, if you type in Z equals, okay, it will put in the exact amount that you put in at the very beginning when you told it what thickness your material was. We're going to use a compression end mill. It's a 1/4 inch. No different really than an end mill, except your compression end mill, it's going to keep you from creating like little splinters on the top, right? And it should give you a pretty clean cut around the edge too. So we're going to try that instead of our regular end mill today. Right? We want it to cut around the outside of our line. So we're going to choose the outside right. It's up to you the way you want it to go around. Kind of like it to go conventional, but let's leave it on client. And then let's go down towards the bottom. I want to show you this little add tabs toolpath right here. Okay, we're going to be talking about this coming up pretty soon. So just so you're familiar with where it is. Okay. Remember I told you earlier that if you can ramp in, it's a little easier on your tools or your tool bits. So let's ramp in by 1/4 inch here. It's kind of a default here. All right, and basically it just means that your bit starts at a 1/4 inch, and it kind of, before it gets down to its final depth, it's going to travel a 1/4 inch. So it's just a little bit easier. And let's choose calculate here. All right, and let's run this one. Cool. There you go. You can see your tray's got a nice smooth edge around. It looks kind of basic, right? But remember, you're using some cherry wood. And this is where I think makers like us, when we're creating things for people, this is where I think you can kind of set yourself apart. You don't have to do fancy kinds of things. If you spend a little time when you go buy your material, find some wood that's got some really interesting patterns. Okay, maybe you're visualizing, I want to make 3 or 4 different trays, right? So go pick out some of the material that's got nice grain, different colors perhaps, or different shades. Because when you cut out your tray, that will make it really, really unique. And it didn't cost you anything more, right? I mean, you could go and pick out just a really plain piece of walnut. If you look close enough, you can find some that's got some darker grains in it. Maybe you see some of the grain lines and they're more circular. And so anyway, my point is that you can make a lot of difference just by what material you select. So that's it. Okay, we're going to go ahead and save our project here. So let's go ahead and save. And we're going to call this first. Let's just call it text tray. All right. So we've got our file saved. Now let's go over, because we do need to create the toolpaths for these. Okay, but before we do, let's take a quick look at one more tool. Okay, the very last line of your toolpath operations is a summary of all toolpaths. You can see it's got a little clock there. If you select that, okay, take a look up here in the top right. It gives you an indication of how long approximately it's going to take to cut out your project. Okay, so our pocket, which we knew was going to take a little bit of time, is going to take 14 minutes by the time it travels back and forth. Okay. Our text, which is the V carve, that's going to take us about 3.5, 4 minutes. And then our cutting it out, it's going to take about 1.5 minutes. So you're talking about 17, 18, 19, almost 20 minutes just for this project to carve out. Now, as I mentioned earlier, you can begin to increase the speeds of some of your cutouts. You can begin to increase the depth of some of the cuts that you make as well. A lot depends on the strength and speed of your CNC. I would say for now, just bite the bullet and go ahead and spend the time, because what's important now is that you're learning how to use the software and you're creating something that's pretty nice without having to learn everything. Okay. All right, let's go ahead and close that. All right. Now we want to save our toolpaths. Let's click on our Save Toolpaths. Okay. We want the visible toolpaths, and by visible, you can see all the ones that are checked down here at the bottom. The last video, I showed you how to rename all of these. Okay. We're going to leave pocket as just pocket because we know what that means. V-carve doesn't really tell us much. Let's rename that. And let's go with text 90. So we know we're doing the text and we're doing it in a 90 degree V bit. Okay. And then our profile, we can rename that as well. If you want to call it maybe the cutout, you could leave it as well. But we know we're going to use 1/4 inch. So 1/4, and we're going to use a compression bit on this one, in mill compression bit. And I guess we could tell this one that we're going to do the pocket in 1-inch bowl. All right, so that's a little bit more descriptive, I guess. Let's go ahead and save these toolpaths. All right. Now remember, we called this one text to tray. So let's start all of our files with text to tray and select save. Now, if we go into our folder, I just want to show you what that's going to look like a little bit later. Okay, so let's go ahead and save our toolpaths. And we need to go back to the desktop. and we're going to go to our CNC projects for YouTube. And if you remember, the name of this file was text to tray. Let's just save. Now, the reason that's important is because when you go to look for your files, right, and we're looking for our text to tray. So these are the G codes. And notice it says text to tray. The first tool that you're going to use is the pocket. Okay. Text to tray. The second one is you're going to do the text. And then the third one is you're going to cut out the tray. So you can see here that it gives you the 1, 2, 3. So you know what order that you're going to do the cutouts in. This just helps you kind of streamline your process and kind of keeps all your files a little bit organized. I have a lot of files here that you can see, and I use a variety of different names for stuff because I dump everything kind of into one folder. Okay, at some point I'll do a little bit more reorganization, which I guess you call that house cleaning. Anyway, so we're ready to go run our files. So next thing, let's get out to our CNC and let's cut this project out. All right, here we are at the Shark HD510 Next Wave CNC. We're going to be preparing our material to cut out this next project. All right, as I've done before, we're going to be using our blue tape to mount our project with. All right, that should be pretty good. Looks like those line up pretty well. Okay, again, I'm using my reference lines here that I've just drawn on my spoil board. Okay, you can already see that I've marked the center of my material with the X, and I try to do it in chalk on this darker color wood. It's just easier to see. And now I'm going to go ahead and center X and Y as we've done before. And basically all that means is that we want to get our bit centered right in the middle of that. And let's go ahead and move that down just so we can get a little bit closer, get a better idea. Okay. All right, we need to go back just a little, maybe a little bit left. That looks pretty good right there. Great. All right, let's start with our first bit, which is going to be our bowl bit. And we're going to change this bit out. Now remember, our total runtime for this whole project was 19 minutes. I'm not going to record all of that, obviously. But I think where you end up saving some time is these little bit changeovers like this. Okay, the more you do this, the faster you get. Or the more efficient you get at it. So we're installing our bowl bit now. We've set our XY axis. So that's good to go. Zero out our plate. So we're going to use the probe. Get our magnet on. Okay, we've gone over to our laptop and we're using the Ready to Control basic software. And we've gone over here and we've found the file, which was called text to tray #1 pocket. Okay, so we're ready to run our pocket on our CNC machine. The only thing we need to do at this point is put the dust boot on, and I'm going to go ahead and do that because this thing makes a real mess without it, and I'll record a little bit of it. All right, we've installed our dust boot back on. We've moved it back over to the center. I'm going to turn on our dust collection. I'll let that run for a minute, and we'll move from there. All right, so we finished recording the bowl cutout, so I can get that off. Nope, so still a little bit too deep, and I have to raise that up. Just fine, got to raise it up anyway. All right, pretty nice job on the bowl there. You have to have a dust collector if you're going to do anything with a bowl bit. These things are a mess. And I think sometimes my hairs get caught in there. They're a little bit too long. We have to trim those a little bit. Okay, let's move on to step 2. And that was to do our engraving. We have our X and Y already centered, so we don't have to do that. All we need to do is change our bit and zero out our Z. So let's do that now. So we're going to be using this 90-degree engraving bit, and we'll get that put in. Okay, and all we need to do now is we need to zero our engraving bit, and this is why we left a little bit over on this side that that was the initial width of the entire project, so that we can zero in on this. All right, let's do that. All right, so we've got our Z zeroed for our engraving bit. All we need to do now is move it back into the XY position. So we'll go back to our software, choose move to XY0. And let me get you over here in front of the software. So we're going to remove the file we just used. We're going to load the next one, which is text to tray. I'm not sure I'm giving you a very good picture of that. Text to tray, text, and then we'll select open. And you'll see our text comes in, and now we simply need to choose run. Okay, now I'm not going to put the dust boot on this. It's only going to take about, I think about 4 minutes if I remember right. Okay, we've finished cutting our engraving. Let me get you a better shot here. Sorry about the shadows there, but you get the idea. These look like lines here, but they really are not. It's really pretty smooth. It just looks like that's just the grain from the from carving out the pocket. Okay, we've installed our 1/4 inch down cut compression bit. We just need to zero it out. And let's move back to our XY 0. Okay, now I won't put the dust boot on this just so you can see this thing cut around the outside. We'll see how this compression bit works. You can see that's traveling right on the very edge, so it's barely cutting anything off. All right, well, let's get our Z out of the way here and see what we got. Nice soft little bristle brush always helps just to clean it up a little bit. I think that turned out really nice. Let's take it out. Well, let's take a look at our finished product here. Yeah, not real crazy with the edge of this with that end mill. That was a pretty deep cut. Well, it was a 1/4 inch at least. But you know what? You hit it with a quick sander and it's gone out of the way. This side's pretty smooth. Just a few little paper-like pieces to remove here. That's easy. But if we take a look at the tray overall, really pretty cherry material. And you can see here that when the tray is looked at from the front, you don't see all those little line marks in there. Probably can still sand it just a little bit. You want to be careful because these are not real deep engravings. You can make them deeper. You can even sand it by hand a little bit while you have it on your CNC just to make sure. But all in all, I think it's a pretty nice tray. And once we put a little bit of a finish on it, something clear, like a clear poly wax or something like that, it's going to look really nice.